Welcome to Suncoast In-Depth Podcast. My name is Brett Watson. I'm joined again by my good friends, Dr. Troy Doucet and Ricardo Aviles. And we are here to talk about the popular notion of hell. Once again, this precedes your talk this Sunday.
Upcoming summer.
Yeah. So it should come as no surprise that in all my years of leading small groups, teaching classes, Bible studies, whatever, this topic comes up more than any other topic. I can all but count on it to come up once, at least once, every Sunday at Suncoast In-Depth. Mm-hmm. It doesn't always, but almost always it comes up in some form. So,
understandably so. I mean, it's a frightening notion.
Yeah, well, he was just telling me, because he's doing all this research, right, for this Sunday, and he was telling me that Dante's Inferno, the sales of Dante's Inferno, like radically outweigh the sales of Paradiso and
Purgatorio.
Purgatorio,
because it's a trilogy. It's a 3-part series that Dante wrote all at once, and
they all want to know about the Inferno.
They don't care about hell. Yeah. They don't care about heaven.
Yeah.
Who's there?
Yeah.
So Dante's Inferno had a huge influence on the popular notion of hell.
What are the questions that you get at Suncoast In-Depth?
Oh gosh, it just depends.
Does hell exist? Am I going there? Are like stuff like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And what does it take to get there? What is it like? All kinds of things, So I think it's important for people to understand the historical construct of this whole notion of hell that's become,
it's a doctrine.
popular.
I mean,
I would ask.
It's a doctrine in many,
I would ask, both of you guys, do you believe in hell?
Yes, but not the popular notion of hell.
Okay.
That's my answer, and I can give explanation if you want.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe believe is a strong word.
Mm-hmm.
I can jive with the idea that there is some kind of purgative state of being that is meant constructively, okay, or correctively and constructively. So for the progress of the soul toward its union with God.
Okay.
There may be, a state of being that helps to do that.
Okay.
But as a fiery inferno with layers of demons and devils just eternally torturing people in all the grossest ways.
Right.
No, I don't believe in that.
What about you, Troy?
No. I agree with the teachings of some of the early church fathers, like Origen, who said that if hell exists, it's not populated by any human at all. But these radical notions of fire and brimstone were more like historically situated in the imagination of the Jewish people toward literal places that actually exist, and not some spiritual place in some other metaphysical realm. So I don't believe in eternal conscious torment. I hold what's called sort of like an annihilationist type view, that if there's, again, I can only think of, I was doing the project, sort of this mental project on the way in to the office, like if there were people who deserved a particular kind of hell or annihilation, I can only think of maybe, like off the top of my head, like 40 people in history, like the Hitlers, the Pol Pots, the Stalins, who, like, I would say, yeah, those guys probably deserve some sort of like annihilation or.
Yeah, their body counts are in the millions.
Yeah, but I mean, we're talking about a very, very, very small percentage of humanity. But the notion of the doctrine of eternal conscious torment within the traditional Christian orthodoxy is that even the Buddhist monk who lives high in the mountains, who is meditating, trying to connect with the divine, because he has not accepted Jesus as his Lord and Savior, that guy too is going to be eternally tormented consciously forever. I'm like, no, like
Yeah.
No, he won't.
Well, that was Rob Bell starts his book off, the one that he talks about.
Love
hell,
Wins.
Love Wins. The story he tells is he's at an art gallery or something like that, or a presentation, and there was a picture of Gandhi, who, Gandhi did a lot of really incredible things in terms of peace and lived in a very Christ-like,
nonviolence,
like Christ-like state.
And was motivated heavily to live that way by the Gospels.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
And underneath that picture of Gandhi, it said, "Too bad he's going to hell." And that's what inspired him to write and look into this notion, because he's like, this seems crazy that this guy who lived such a Christ-like life, but because of where he was born and the culture that he was raised in and the circumstances of his birth, he's automatically doomed to hell.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are so many of these. Just kind of, I don't want to do like spoilers
it's
for
fine.
Sunday, but you and I were talking about the sermon coming up this Sunday, and you were borrowing a concept from NASA around a documentary you watched on the James Webb Telescope.
Yeah.
Single point
Failure.
Yeah, single point failures, yeah.
Yeah. So there are some single point failures. That is
The whole construct of hell. So James Webb Telescope was launched, and when you're sending a probe like that 1 million miles away from Earth, and you have to, because it's so large it won't fit on a rocket ship, you have to open up its sort of space shield and
in the mirror.
in outer space from 1 million miles away by robotics.
$20 billion worth of.
Yeah, $20 billion worth of equipment. And at any point of that process, they call them single point mission failures. That means if one thing
happens,
goes wrong in this event, the whole thing fails. And so just the opening of the sun shield, which protects the mirrors from the sunlight so that we get beautiful images without, the effect, because we can't see stars at night because of light pollution or whatever.
I'd be willing to bet money that some of the guys in the operation room, they went to that day that all that stuff had to unfold and work just right, and all the threat of single point failure,
Yeah.
I bet you they were wearing Depends.
Oh, had to.
Yeah.
Had to be sipping on some sort of nice bourbon, man. But in that one event of opening up the sun shield, there were 255 single point mission failures in just that one we're talking literally hundreds of other things that had to happen. But just in that one thing of it opening its shield, 255 single point missions.
Yeah.
That's a lot of single point possibilities. And
It's a
for
hell
me,
of a lot.
that's a hell of a lot.
The total was 700 and
Yeah, it
change, somewhere around that. So
Yeah.
that telescope had 700 something points of failure.
Single point.
You need to watch that.
And so when you think of like this concept of hell, a place of eternal, conscious torment for literally infinity. Like we live in such a time, man, where numbers don't mean what they should mean.
Yeah.
Like we live in a culture with the onslaught of social media. Like if you don't make $1 million a year, you're poor.
Right.
Yeah.
Because of all these enormous like sports contracts. And when in fact,
Then I'm like back-breaking poverty, man.
oh dude, wow, it's insane.
Barely
But we don't
pay my bills.
get the concept of like 100 trillion years, and you haven't even begun.
Right.
To torment. That's ridiculous, right?
And so every time this comes up, man, ask Kevin O'Hara. Every time this comes up and we talk about this concept and we go into that, you can listen, you can hear how Kevin would say it, So trillions and trillions and trillions of years, and that's just the beginning. And I just think, I just always giggle. Like, and the reason that I giggle is because it's so friggin' stupid.
It is.
I hate to be demeaning with that. I really do. Because I know that a lot of people believe this.
But it's based solely on their appropriation of the scripture, right? Of what the Bible is. It is absolutely authoritative and ineffable, infallible, inerrant. And you hear someone, and not to call a name out because he's retired now, but someone like John MacArthur, right? Deep Calvinist guy, very smart.
Retired?
Oh yeah, man. Deep Calvinist guy, very smart man, but he believes like that monk in China is going to hell for ever.
Right.
Because he didn't believe in Jesus. And I go, dude, if anything, I showed Sunday that we can't even get right who showed up to Jesus' empty tomb first in that book. And you're going to go ahead and say, throw all your chips in, like, because the guy didn't believe in Jesus.
Like, how bad is your need for certainty?
So
if you're willing to make
So start from the beginning then. So like, if you make the claim that when Jesus talks about hell, or at least what we picture hell to be in the New Testament, what is he talking about?
Yeah, well, he's actually using a term that is, it's a way of saying the Valley of Hinnom. It's an actual literal geographical location.
Okay.
I've seen it.
But is he using imagery to show people like this is what the life is going to be like if you make bad decisions?
So the reason that he uses that imagery is there's some debate about this, but I'll just keep it simple. The Valley of Hinnom, it was said that the worshipers of Chemosh or of Molech, they're not sure. Some scholars say it's the act of Molech in the worship of Chemosh or vice versa. So who knows? But part of their worship was to sacrifice, to make the ultimate sacrifice. So you sacrifice your child. So there was infant sacrifice taking place there. They would burn them alive. And so obviously the Jews saw this as detestable. So the place, the Valley of Hinnom, Gehenna, was considered a detestable place, massively defiled by this practice. And then there are some scholars who believe that the place then became kind of a dump where the discarded bodies of criminals would be dumped.
Right.
And fires were kept there to, keep disease from spreading and whatnot, and obviously maggots or worms, so that you get the imagery of, the unquenchable fire and the worm that never dies,
right.
That you see in the Gospels. But it's interesting. You referenced the people how they position themselves with the Bible, right? But even if you were to believe that it's inerrant or infallible, either one of those positions, it really can't defend the notion of eternal torment. So when you go to chapter 25 in Matthew's Gospel, for example, a verse
that's
that
the
is
popular one.
Yeah, that's a very popular passage to defend the notion of eternal punishment. The words there that are translated as eternal, the word that's translated as eternal is aionios, and it has a very large sphere of meaning. I've gone over this before, but rarely ever used to denote our concept of eternity, which has a very small sphere of meaning without beginning, without end, maybe forever. Okay, you could use it that way too, and it often is. But aionios can mean a great many things. It's translated sometimes as age to come, or age enduring, or the quality of an age. It'll be used to talk about the quality of an age versus the quality of another age, that sort of thing. So then you have the word colossus, which is translated as punishment in that gospel in most English translations. And the problem there is that the Greek term to use for retributive punishment, like an eternal torment situation, conscious torment, would be timoria. There's no question about that. You can look at all ancient Greek literature, and that's what you'll see is used to denote that kind of idea. But the term used in Matthew's Gospel is colossus, and colossus has its roots in agriculture, to prune. So colossus would be used to denote a corrective kind of punishment, like a loving father would use for his child.
Okay.
And so it makes no sense then to translate it as eternal if it's corrective.
Okay.
What's the point of correcting someone forever? It doesn't make any sense, right?
Okay.
So that, to me, is a single point mission failure.
Yep.
Right.
For this popular
Language.
notion of eternal conscious torment.
So let me jump on that a little bit. So to kind of give a little bit more context in what Jesus is talking about, obviously Jesus was of the Jewish faith. He was a rabbi.
Mm-hmm.
He's talking to mainly Jewish audience.
Yeah.
What was the Jewish perspective as far as we know, because obviously we can't go back and ask them, but like as far as we know, what was the Jewish perspective on not just hell, but just like the idea of an afterlife?
Well, ancient Jewish and first century Jewish are different.
Okay, so what the audience that Jesus is talking to?
The audience that he's talking to, first century Jews, did have some ideas about the afterlife. If you look at Talmudic writings, you'll see references to a purgative state of being, where that, typically they give them 12 months. Like that's where you go and you get your soul cleansed.
Okay.
Before you move on.
Okay.
That's right.
To the world to come. And so that was the popular notion, and that's probably what Jesus had in mind when he used all this imagery. Don't know that for sure, but there's good reason to think so.
Okay.
But as far as the Old Testament, there's nothing about
No,
An afterlife.
Their shield, the grave, which is just
a very shadowy concept.
the
It's-
grave. It's the grave.
Yeah.
That's where everybody went. Righteous, unrighteous, just went to Sheol, which is again the grave. They'll take there's a passage in Daniel 12 that talks about the unrighteous will have to go back to the dust and face eternal contempt. And a lot of more conservative scholars say, well, that's our first notion of. And I went, no. I said, when you look at the concept of that Hebraic word, it simply means eternal contempt means, hey, remember John? That dude was a jerk. So he has to live with the contempt of him being a jerk for people. He will only be remembered as being a jerk.
Interesting.
And so that's it. And then Hosea, the prophet Hosea mentions like the first notions of like God taking a soul and like annihilating it. Like there's no punishment, there's no eternal torment. It's just the cessation of existence or being. So
So then the audience that Jesus was talking to in the handful of verses that he mentions some sort of hellish type afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is it more than just that one verse, Matthew? Is there multiple verses?
Yeah.
So is it always Gehenna that the word is?
No.
Okay.
When you get into the epistles, Peter's one epistle, I shouldn't say Peter's because there's a very good likelihood that Peter didn't write either one of those, but that's what they've been named, right? Tartarus is used at one point, which is a Greek term that describes outer darkness for gods and demigods that did the wrong thing.
I would like to also point out,
crossed the wrong path.
that's right.
I would also like to point out too that the fact that Jesus would have been speaking Aramaic, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
So, and then the writers are writing in Greek,
Yes.
and then the Greek translations are translated into.
English or whatever.
Whatever
Yeah.
language. Yeah.
Okay, so most of the translations that we currently have, like the NIV, NLT, King James Version, were all translated from the Greek
and
text.
Hebrew. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So it's almost like a game of telephone a little bit too.
Yeah, I don't like to use that analogy, and the reason for that is we have so much manuscript evidence, and we keep finding more, and the consistency that we find throughout really kind of throws the telephone analogy out the window.
What do you mean by consistency?
Well, like we have tons of Greek manuscripts. We have Syriac. We do have some Aramaic works. I'm talking about New Testament here,
right.
and many other languages, Coptic, and so on. So, and these manuscripts span a large amount of time, some older than others, right? But you see this serious consistency, like
Okay.
99, so much consistency that some scholars would say the representation of the New Testament documents, we can say, are 99% correct to the original autographs, the original writings.
Right. Okay.
But that's the thing. We do not have the original
We don't.
manuscripts.
We don't. But we have a ton.
We have a ton of
manuscript
manuscripts that all were very carefully transcribed. Now we do have some that have transcription, like within the margins, and
Right.
and some Bibles are very clear to point those out. Like for instance, in the Gospel of Mark, where it says they shall pick up serpents and no harm shall come to them. That's in
the end of
margins,
chapter 16.
but it's not in our oldest manuscripts. It's
Okay.
in some of the newer manuscripts. And people take it and run with it. That's why you have these Appalachian churches who handle poisonous snakes and die. Yeah. And you just want to have a conversation with like, maybe we should stick to the oldest manuscripts.
Yes.
Right. But where the problem is in the translation from that language to the modern language. Because you have these old languages which are very similar, right? So like my wife speaks 6 languages, dude. And she picks these up very fast because she goes, "Oh yeah, that's a Latin-based root. I understand what those words are because they're very common and similar." That was the same with, sort of Hebrew, Aramaic, right? These words were
So
spoken.
many seem to be tied into the
They're tied into
Indo-European.
that,
Yeah.
So it's easy to have 99% accuracy in those sort of ancient languages. But the problem happens when you start, like when Luther translates it into German.
German, yeah.
Because there's a German word for everything, And then you get into English, which is a very, very difficult language. And and every translator has to make subjective decisions on what they're going to say. And one word can change the entire meaning. And we've shown that, we've shown it multiple times in class, from the stage, and that when you just change that one word, like I did it Sunday when I replaced the word "word" with the word "Bible."
Yeah.
And people literally, you could see the crowd laugh out loud. In the beginning was the Bible, and the Bible was with God, and the Bible was God, and nothing came into existence without the Bible. And people were like, "No, that's not. It doesn't sound right."
Right.
Because that's not what it means.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, same thing with hell. Hell, there is a history, and that's what I'm going to say Sunday. Every belief has a history. And if we're ignorant's not a bad word. It just means lacking knowledge. If you don't know the history of a belief, you're bound to believe it, you know. And that's the thing. I used to believe in hell, like eternal.
Well, and that was going to be my next question. So this is actually an individual question for both of you.
Yeah. So
at what point in your study, obviously you both believed in hell early on in your faith journey. At what was like the one thing that's, if there is, that stuck out, that's like, I'm done with this doctrine, like I've seen enough?
Yeah. Me first?
Go ahead. Yeah.
For me, it was actually Kevin O'Hara. We went through a lot of our deconstruction together. And that deconstruction came through a lot of digging research. And
That's such a general concept of like research. So like what specifically, like what were you looking at? What were you reading?
excerpts from the fathers, which are compiled in books.
The fathers, like the
that I
early church
listed
fathers?
there. Yeah.
Okay.
And their notion of the afterlife just didn't jive with this concept that's popular today of eternal conscious torment. And seeing that these brilliant men had much more sensible notions of the afterlife is kind of where it was just, that's it.
That was
done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So going back and seeing the early works of the early church fathers that were the foundation of Christianity.
The guys that the apostles handed the baton to and said, keep running.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Nice.
Because universal salvation was the predominant view for like the first 500,000 years or whatever.
What is universal salvation?
It means all the power of God through the work of Christ is unstoppable, relentless. Like all shall be saved.
Also come back to God.
God's all powerful.
Right.
Therefore, my decision to believe or not believe does not hinder or
Eventually all things are restored to God.
to God.
Apokatastasis.
Apokatastasis. For me, I read, I was aware of some of the church fathers, but I read a book. It was a very simply arranged book, very accessible, and it was called The Four Views of Hell. I had no idea there were 4 views of hell when I was my
It's like the atonement theory. So you didn't know that there was
know there was a bunch of
Yeah.
And so I picked up the book and I read it in one sitting. Then I read it again, and the more I read it, the more the argument for eternal conscious torment made little sense when you compared it to the other views, which I'll talk about Sunday. I'm going to show all 4 views Sunday. And so that's when I aligned somewhere between that annihilationist view, the cessation of existence as being part of God's loving character, and also the metaphorical view, which I think is this very strong view as well. Like the language itself is metaphorical. And because I would make an argument that there's very little in Jesus' teaching that is obsessed with any afterlife. Heaven is here, and you could bring it to earth. But hell is also something that is apparent daily on earth. You go through cancer, that's hell. Your child dies, that's hell. And those are metaphorical ideas of Jesus says there is a way to live. And I like the way John Shelby Spong said it, man. I'm going to steal some of his stuff Sunday too. He said, why can't we change this notion that God is not trying to save us from being human, but he's trying to save us to be better human, like save us toward our humanity, not to take us out of it. Because everything you read Jesus says, he's like, Father, you didn't take him out of the world. Don't separate him from the world, because you put him here for a reason. Like we are here for a very specific purpose, and that's to learn how to truly live. So why would God want to rescue us from that which he created us to be in the first place? That would necessitate God going, oh, I made a mistake, when in fact he's trying to show us how to correct our mistake, which is what any good parent would do. And so that was my sort of transition from holding that literal view into more of a metaphorical or annihilationist view. So
Okay.
yeah,
That's really helpful.
I'm not an annihilationist myself.
Right.
But, well, I would leave room that annihilation is theoretically possible.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. Yeah.
If we mean by annihilation that particular stream of conscious reality ceases to be a particular stream of conscious reality.
Yeah.
But if everything is energy, including our thoughts, our consciousness, everything is energy, then energy cannot be created or destroyed,
That's
right?
Matter, you can't destroy matter.
Yeah. So in that sense, no, I'm not an annihilationist, but I can hold open the possibility that, a certain conscious stream, a person or soul, whatever you want to call it, could cease to exist as it is and be redone, so to speak.
I read a story of a pastor back in the late 90s, early 2000s, very evangelical pastor. Had a big church somewhere, I think it was in the Northeast somewhere, and he got in a car wreck, like was in a bad automobile accident, and lost his memory. So that whatever that energy force was annihilated, and he had to kind of regain knowledge of, this is your wife, these are your children.
No kidding. Wow.
And you were a pastor of a church that loved you, a big community, a couple of thousand people. And he's like, what's that? And you told the story, and they tell him the Jesus story, and he's like, that's BS. There's no way. There's no way. And like completely, because of this accident,
Right.
like says, that's not what I want to do anymore. Like, because that story makes no sense to me. And you have some of his friends were like, dude, you're going to lose your salvation, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, well, then I'll lose it. But for me, that's sort of like that annihilationist understanding is like, there can be events that like wipe out that stream of consciousness. And so anyway, maybe that's what it means to be in that view. The bad things have been restored, and there's no recollection of evil anymore or whatever. So.
Yeah.
So then, if a lot of the early church fathers didn't necessarily believe in eternal conscious torment, where did we get a lot of our imagery? Where did we get this doctrine of hell if it's not necessarily empirically, biblically based?
Great question.
That's a good question.
So when we look at the history, and I'm going to oversimplify it here, it's very complicated. It's full of humanity.
Sure.
But when you get to the 5th century, you have the Emperor Justinian coming to power, and he was very set on, his goals were enormous. He wanted to reunite the East and the West. At this point in history...
What do you mean by East and West?
Yes. By this point in history, the Roman Empire had the center of power had shifted to what's known today as Istanbul. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. Or in the past, it was called Constantinople. And so he reigned from there, but living there, socially speaking, right, it was everything to be Roman, even though they weren't in Rome. And so he had this huge dream to restore the former glory of the Roman Empire. And he, like Constantine, saw Christianity, even more than Constantine, as a major tool for bringing things together.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
Just 500 years later.
Yeah.
Yep.
So he, 200 years later for him and Constantine, but yeah, he, you mean 500 years after Christianity started, yeah. And so he favored the school of Rome because it's Rome,
Yeah.
right? And so he pressured the House of Bishops during his time to anathematize the fathers who were bought into non-Roman schools of thought.
Okay.
Like Origen.
Okay.
I mean, Origen was a badass,
He's a bad dude.
prolific writer. 6,000 works in his lifetime. He had teams of scribes jotting down his thoughts. This guy was brilliant, but didn't fit with Justinian and his goals. So let's get rid of him. So he pressured the House of Bishops, and the Eastern emperors had a lot. They could apply a lot more pressure than the Western emperors did on the House of Bishops. To their credit, the House of Bishops did not declare Origen accursed. They just declared some of his speculations as no good. And so he became a church father with a little f, so to speak, and others. So the short story to that is the Bishop of Rome began. He already had a lot of prominence, but he gained a lot more under Justinian. And because the West was in trouble politically, barbarian raids, so on and so forth, the Bishop of Rome also became a powerful political figure alongside of the Eastern Emperor. And then eventually they just split altogether. Justinian didn't really achieve the unification of both empires. But that's how the School of Rome gained more prominence. So then you have guys like Tertullian, a church father, or Latin father, who gained a lot of notoriety. You had Augustine, huge influence on the Western Church. So that notion of eternal conscious torment, really, that's where it gained a lot of traction. And of course, being in America, where we're heavily influenced by the Roman Catholic Church and the Reformation, that's how it became the popular notion.
So because of who the person was in charge of dictating doctrine at the time. Okay.
Yeah.
That's right.
All right.
Sadly.
Yeah. And Rome was highly Hellenized, right? And just like when you read Genesis 1, the creation myth, like that's deeply Egyptian. Well, you would expect that, coming out of Egypt at the time of the writing. And the same way, the Romans...
And Mesopotamian, too.
That's right.
They're all
Huge Mesopotamian.
cross-influence there. But
The same thing in Rome. The Greeks had the understanding of an afterlife, of punishment. And again, it became this punishment versus reward afterlife.
Right.
And when you read the message of Jesus, very little has to do with punishment or reward.
Well, and you would think too, like if Jesus is God in a human form, like that's a pretty big freaking deal. Like if you get this wrong, you're gonna suffer for a really, really long time.
That's right. That's right.
Like you would think that would be at the forefront of his message. Like, don't get this wrong.
Yeah.
Don't get this wrong. Don't
would.
get this wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't get this wrong.
Yeah.
Like, who cares
And
about
if- and
feeding
if it's up-
5,000 people? Don't get this wrong.
That's right.
Like,
I don't give a rat's butt about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even raising people from the dead.
Yeah.
Look, you want to look at that stuff? Don't get hung up on that.
Like, I'm
Here's
here-
a list of things you need to know
exactly.
and
Be
do.
very, 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 very
I'm
clear.
here
Otherwise,
for
it's
a
eternal
week,
conscious
boys.
torment.
I'm here for a week. I got to go to China. I got to go to the Native Americans.
Right.
I'm like Santa Claus. I got to make some rounds so everybody
because
gets
this
this right.
I mean, we only live, like, if we're lucky, 85 years on this earth.
yeah.
Yeah.
So this is just a blip on the radar.
Yeah, and
Like
it was much sooner death. Jesus would have been considered an old man in his time. Like he would have been considered old. I mean,
33.
average age there was probably 35, 36. So he was an old dude. But even then, like I'm of the persuasion that even if our understanding of retributive justice, if there's such a thing as some sort of post-death punishment, a just God would only give what is due and not more. And eternality seems to be an exacerbation of
I accidentally had a
any
glass
justice,
of wine.
any notion of
and
justice.
therefore wouldn't be justice.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's an interest. So where did the imagery come from then? Like the imagery of hell. Like if you ask anybody off the street, like what is hell like? You
Yeah.
have fire and brimstone. You have demons torturing you pretty harshly. I always imagine that scene. You guys remember Terminator, Judgment Day?
Oh yeah.
Remember when the robot, the villain robot falls into the lava and he's just kind of thrashing around?
That's right.
Like that was always, like as a kid I watched that movie and that was always the imagery of what I thought hell would be like, just like literally in lava, just thrashing around in
not
suffering,
dying,
pain, and just not being able to die. So like where did a lot of that, because if you look at the text of at least what Jesus is saying, he doesn't really describe hell in like a crazy amount of detail.
No, that's for sure.
No.
You get the imagery of the unquenchable fire and the undying worm. And that's about it.
Yeah.
And then you get into, other New Testament writings, especially in Revelation, and you have the lake of fire and that sort of thing. So some of the imagery comes from there, but should remember that fire is often is used to depict a refinement process too.
Yes.
Not
make pure.
not just a destructive. Yes, to make pure. But a lot of the imagery of like demons, with a pitchfork dunking you in the lava,
Right.
and that kind of thing, or then picking your bones out and reconstituting you and then putting you back in
Oh my gosh. That is
for
horrifying.
eternity,
Yeah.
forever. That's a lot of Dante, man. I mean,
That's
and,
all
and,
Dante,
and
man.
other writers of the Middle Ages. So
Paradise Lost.
Yeah.
and Milton. And
Yeah.
again, it's an obsession. It's become an obsession.
Well, I think a lot of people are afraid, like that's
Sure.
And it was like, I heard Richard Dawkins, who's a famous atheist scholar,
Evolutionist
like evolutionist,
scholar,
yeah. And a Christian, you can tell she was just like this student. She just like, after one of his lectures, he's doing a Q&A, and she's like, well, what if you're wrong?
Yeah.
And he just goes on this long but very like eloquent rant about, well, what if you're wrong? He's like, what if you're wrong and the Hindus are right? What if you're wrong and the Buddhists are right? And because they say X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And he's like, you're talking about something that like is solely dependent on where you grew up and where you live and what culture you were born into and what century you were born into. Like there's been a lot of religions in the lifetime of humanity.
Yeah.
Like we just have, I mean, there's a lot of religions today, you know, and it's just like, so you're telling me, like, he's like, what if you got it wrong? And it was just such a great like perspective change as far as like, man, a lot of people are doomed. A lot of people are doomed if this is real.
Yes.
If this is right.
The vast majority. So this is
including the early Jewish church, because Jesus didn't come to die for them and save them from that hellish fate.
So single point mission failure, right? So let's go back to that analogy you're using this Sunday. One of those for me is a more theophilosophical point of failure for this concept of eternal conscious torment. Almost, if not all, of the scholars who buy into this notion also believe that God is all-knowing, all-loving, okay? All benevolent, whatever you want to say.
All-powerful.
You see the contradiction, right? That means that if your concept of hell is true and your concept of God being all-knowing and all-loving is true, you have a contradiction, because that means that God foreknew in the creation of all beings which ones were going to spend eternity in conscious torment. The natural question then is, why did you bother to make them? Why bother?
Yeah.
Single point mission failure. Am I wrong? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I would say that the Christian response to that would be his ways are higher.
Yeah. Thanks for that. You know,
Thanks, God.
let's talk. I mean, come on.
No.
Yeah.
Let's not just throw out platitudes and whatever. Think about it. You know, God is not illogical. He's the Logos.
Well, and that's not the God that Jesus paints a very
No.
it paints a very detailed picture of, and Jesus didn't live his life that way. He never.
No.
I mean, he never was he never punished people the way we think that God is going to punish us with hell. He always took the side of the sinners. He always brought them back.
Even in the face of contradicting Scripture, and even in the face of
The law.
disobeying the law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't heal on the Sabbath. Sabbath was made for you. You weren't made for it.
Yep.
And
You've heard that it was said, but I tell you,
That's it.
Yeah.
dude, no wonder they killed him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I go, even his parable of the lost sheep, he leaves the 99 to go get the one. Why? Because he's a good father? Yeah, maybe so. I just think that is the most powerful illustration we have. All shall be well.
A pretty wild archaeological. Oh man, I did it again. Archaeological, I guess, affirmation of universalism being so popular in the early church are found in the catacombs, where you have this artwork that depicts the Good Shepherd carrying on his shoulders the one that walked away, and very often that depiction is of a goat,
Oh.
not as a sheep.
Oh. Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Because that's the other parable, the sheep and the goat.
The sheep and the goats.
Even the
Matthew
goats
25.
Shall be saved. Even the goats will be saved.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
Yep.
That's
Isn't
really
it?
cool.
So
Yeah, man.
I don't want to tell people not to be afraid, not to abandon your beliefs necessarily, but I would encourage them to dig deeper.
This isn't
And,
as black and white.
Yeah.
as you
Definitely
think.
not.
Yeah.
Think a little harder, man.
Yeah, that popular notion of hell, I would say, based on my research, has no basis in history, no foundation in history, no foundation in Scripture, and philosophically, it's just heaped with problems.
Yep.
Yeah.
So think about that.
Yep. It's awesome, man.
Thanks, guys.
Got it.
Thank you.
Love you.
Love you too.